Hello and welcome to Talk FCB and welcome back here to the channel, guys, for another video. Now firstly, thank you all for your many questions on the Q&A video that I released last night. That'll be coming up, like I said, when I reach 50,000 subscribers. But thank you all for your contributions. There's some really great questions in there and I'm really looking forward to answering them. But today's video is going to be based on Barcelona's shape, Barcelona's structure in the matches since Ernesto Valverde has taken charge of Barcelona. Because I think there's some very, very big elements that he's changed, and most importantly I'm going to be looking at today what has changed since Neymar left, how we've adapted to that, and what the new signings like Nelson Semedo and like Ousmane Dembele can bring to the team in terms of our shape and in terms of the structure of the entire team. So we're going to start by looking at the game against Real Betis, then we're going to go on to the game against Alaves, Espanyol, and then we're going to finish up by taking a look at our shape against Juventus, and we're going to compare that to the game that we played under Luis Enrique against Juve just a few months previous to that, back in April, and we're going to look at the difference in our shape, of which there is a massive change in the way that we've played. So we're going to start by looking at the game against Betis. Now first of all, the infographics that I'm going to be using in this video throughout are coming to you courtesy of 11tegan11 on Twitter, so if you want to go and follow them, they do come up with some fantastic graphics of those that I'm about to show you, and that is how we're going to look at this, because I think this shows a massive story into what happens in a game, how we set ourselves up, and exactly how Ernesto Valverde wants us to play. And I think as you look at these different graphics, you're going to see from the game against Betis, then against Alaves, then against Espanyol, and then I think you see the real pinnacle of what Valverde is trying to do against Juventus. And I think it's a gradual change, a gradual sort of implementing his philosophy, and I think now we're really starting to grasp that. The players are starting to understand it more and more every game. Now as we move on to these graphics, I want you to bear in mind that there is three specific positions that I personally believe that if these three players or these three positions are really played to the maximum of their ability in the coming season, it will determine single-handedly whether we have a successful season or not. Because I think that the three massive cogs and the massive parts of this team are, number one, the two fullbacks. The two fullbacks in Jordi Alba and Nelson Semedo. Always keep an eye on where they are in the pitch, because this season they are going to be the source of our width, particularly down the left-hand side. Jordi Alba, particularly with the absence of Neymar, which I'm going to come on to later, he has a massive role in this team this season, and you've already seen the quality that he has shown compared to previous years. He's had an outstanding season so far. The second massive cog in this team, as it always has been, when we've been good, it's been because of Sergio Busquets in that midfield. Highlight his position massively, just between the two centre-backs, slightly more advanced, withdrawn than the other two. Him in that midfield is the absolute dictator. He gets that ball and he is the start of everything. He's the start of our defence and he's the start of our attacks. Everything starts with him, it revolves around him, and we need him to be in the perfect position, and most importantly, those two midfielders ahead of him need to be close enough to be effective within the reach of Busquets. He needs to be able to find them easily, he can get us out of trouble, but in order to do that, he needs to be able to find those two midfielders. And finally, the massive part of the team, the be-all end-all, the match winner at the end of the day, the best player the world has ever seen, Lionel Messi. And what do you want to do about Messi? The most important thing about that is get the best out of him. He's there, he's amazing. Make sure that he is in the positions that will allow him to show that genius. Get him as close to the opposition box as possible. Try to avoid him dropping deep, and by doing that, you've got to make sure that you've got a strong midfield. You have to make it so that Messi doesn't have to do the work himself. You're providing him with the chances, with the ball. That starts with Busquets, that goes on with Iniesta and Rakitic, whoever else is in midfield, and then Messi in that false nine role is close to the goal. He can be lethal, he can be clinical, he can score goals, he can create goals. Everything starts and ends with him in the final third. So the fullbacks are a massive part, then Sergio Busquets, and then finishing it all off with the final magnificent touch, Lionel Messi. Those are the three roles that I want you to keep an eye on in all of these graphics, because as we come to the Juventus game, all three positions are really nailed down and are in fantastic positions, which contributed to our success on the night. But before we get on to that game, I want to have a look at a bit more of the evolution of the Ernesto Valverde system at Barcelona, and that starts at home against Real Betis in our first league game of the new season. Now, in this game, it's key to bear in mind that he didn't have Dembele available, he hadn't signed yet, Luis Suarez was out injured, so Valverde had to improvise a bit here with his selection and also with his formation. He actually went with a 4-2-3-1 formation, which actually on the day worked quite well. It wasn't something that he was going to stick with, but in certain games this season we could see this formation work out. out. You can see the position of the fullbacks. Those are perfect. That's exactly how you want them. You want them as wide as possible. What that happens is they then stretch the pitch. They give everybody the maximum amount of space possible inside of them. Then you've got Sergio Busquets in a key role in midfield. He can play this role too, by the way. He's a clever enough footballer to not only be played as a defensive midfielder, but he can slot in as an interior if he needs to. He can control the ball. His first touch is outstanding. His short passing is brilliant. He can play in that role if required. The only problem is when we're playing in a 3 in midfield, he can't really play as an interior because we got nobody to replace him in that defensive role, which I was so surprised as to why we sort of loaned out Sergi Samper, because that could have been a little experiment which could have gone nicely. But anyway, Alcácer here on the left hand side for me doesn't really understand his positioning. He didn't really have much of an effect in this game. Sergio Roberto was everywhere, but the most important thing to note once again was Lionel Messi. That's the start of him in that false 9 position, and he was outstanding against Real Betis. He had Deulofeu to his right, Roberto and Alcácer to his left, and then he had Busquets and Rakitic feeding him from behind. He did have to drop deep a few times in this game, which highlighted further that we needed a bit more in midfield. We needed those 3, Busquets a bit deeper, and then 2 in midfield to sort of control the ball a bit more and get the ball more often to Lionel Messi. And I think that's what we saw. We saw the very start here of what Valverde was trying to do. He got the fullbacks absolutely right. We saw the effect very early on from Nelson Semedo, and we saw the resurgence of Jordi Alba down that left-hand side, a player that had a lot more freedom without Neymar. He was able to get up and down that left. He had a lot more time on the ball. He had a lot more balls into him from the likes of Busquets, Umtiti. Instead of it going to Neymar, instead of it stopping, instead of it being delayed, it was very quick. It was always direct. Alba was getting the ball. He was able to make his runs into a lot of room, and in that way, he stretched the pitch. He gave us options. He gave us outlets, and he was a real menace down that left-hand side throughout the entire Betis game, and that was very much a sign of things to come. Now, against Alaves, we dominated the ball once again, but I think this time we saw different elements of Valverde's plan coming together. The fullbacks weren't quite as effective, I don't feel, in this game, but the midfield was much more structured, as you can see here. Busquets was in that deeper role with Iniesta and Rakitic ahead of him, and they were in a good shape. Messi had to stop a bit deeper because of the fullbacks. I think here, Roberto playing at right back, we know that he's not absolutely fantastic as a right back. Semedo has been the much better option, and also Alex Vidal ahead of him didn't do a great job in his role either. So in this game, the fullbacks weren't quite there. Messi had to drop deep a bit more often. The midfield were getting the right sort of shape, and against Alaves, once again, we got through the game. Messi was in that false 9 role, so he provided the goals. He was effective when he was inside the area, getting those chances, being clinical in front of goal. But I think in this game, once again, it highlighted the importance in this team of Nelson Semedo. Once again, you can see here in the midfield, very slightly, but Ivan Rakitic is being dragged over to that right-hand side, and that is what happened throughout the whole of last season. That is why I think we've seen a much better Rakitic with Semedo in that right-back position, because Rakitic knows when Sergi Roberto is there, he's not a natural right-back, so Rakitic at times is going to have to slot in and cover for him and do a bit of defensive work. He's shackled almost when he hasn't got a proper right-back in that role, so that's why it affects the midfield as well. When you've got Semedo there, when you've got Alba there, they're 2 brilliant players, 2 brilliant fullbacks that suit our system perfectly, that allows everybody else to get on with their own job instead of having to worry about covering for them too. Of course they'll cover, you know, they'll still do that in games. Even when Semedo is there, you'll still want the midfield to cover, but it's not as often, and it's not a constant worry on Rakitic's mind. Now we're going to look at the game against Espanyol. Now this is when I feel like the crescendo was building. He was all gearing up for that massive game against Juve, and this is when you saw his plan really start to come together. Semedo and Jordi Alba, 2 of the absolute key players in this game, were both unbelievable. Look at those combinations between Umtiti and Jordi Alba. The thickness of the arrow indicates the amount of passes going between the 2 players. Very thick there. The combination down that left between those 2 was outstanding. Jordi Alba ran the show down that left-hand side, and I just want to talk about him in relation to Neymar and why Alba now, I think, is so much freer in that role. Because Neymar before him, you can see it here, ahead of him is Luis Suarez on the left-hand side, but Suarez, when he's there, isn't going to play particularly as a left winger. He's going to be on the left as such. He's going to drift over to the wing at times, but in general, he's just going to be towards the left of Lionel Messi. He's not going to play as an out-and-out winger, and what that allows Jordi Alba to do is have the entire of the left field entirely to his own, and he can run into that. He can use the pace that we know that he has, blistering pace. He can make fantastic runs. He's always been an intelligent player in terms of his runs. It's just been that final ball which has been a lot of people's qualm with him. Can he play that final ball? Can he play that decisive pass? Right now, the answer is yes. Right now, he's having time to think about it. He's not having to worry about Neymar picking the ball up. He's not having to worry about Neymar Neymar passing him the ball, because you know what Neymar was like. You know, I'm not going to start slating him. I think he's still a great player. But what he did in this team a lot of the time was slow things down. That is the opposite to what Alba thrives on. Alba likes direct. Alba likes quick play. He likes to get onto things. Neymar a lot of the time slowed play down. He delayed the pass. A lot of the time the combination between the two wasn't quite there. We even saw it in one game where they actually had a full-on argument. So I think without Neymar, Jordi Alba is very much unleashed, and we're seeing the beauty of that right now. But also to note in this game is Semedo, and again down that right-hand side with Deulofeu, he did exactly the same thing. He's not always quite as advanced as Alba. Alba by far is the one that is more attacking, but Semedo can do that too, believe me. When he gets going, he's very, very difficult to stop. And once again we highlight Lionel Messi in that false nine role. A lot of balls going between him and Rakitic. That midfield again, getting their structure right, the three in midfield. Rakitic isn't having to do a lot of defensive work for Semedo. He's more central, and for that we're much, much better off. And like I say, this was just building for that Juventus game. We were getting our system ready, we were polishing it up, Valverde was getting ready, and boy did we unleash it in the next game. Would you look at that? That right there is art. It really is. And I know it's just a picture, I know it's just a graphic, but that is something, there's something quite beautiful about that. And I really do think that Valverde got it spot on. He's been working on it, he's been developing it. The players have been working on it too. A new coach, they need time to sort of integrate his ideas, but now they're seeing it, now they're getting it right. And this team right now looks balanced, it looks structured, it looks like it's understanding what it's supposed to be doing. And not only going forward, but defensive structure is so important as well. And when you have a team like this, structured in the way that we are, it can really impact you defensively as well. And you've got to take into account, we've not conceded a goal yet in the league, or in the Champions League game against Juventus. And that's simply because players are aware of their roles, they're understanding them, they know exactly where they're supposed to be, not only going forward, but in the defensive structure as well. And that is absolutely vital. Now what I'm going to do for you now is show you the difference in shape between Ernesto Valverde's Barcelona against Juventus on Tuesday and Luis Enrique's Barcelona against Juventus just a few months ago, back in April, when we faced them in the Champions League at the Camp Nou. Now what I want to say before that is that I don't entirely hold Luis Enrique responsible. I know a lot of people don't really like him, but I wasn't a hater during his time. I think what he did with us, particularly during his first two seasons, was very, very effective for the time that he was at. But I think what was really wrong with this team right now is the fact that we didn't have a suitable right back, and I think Neymar actually down that left hand side, of course he gave us magic, but I think now we're a lot more balanced. I think Luis Enrique didn't really understand the structure of midfield, he didn't really give us that midfield control, but that was because he had MSN and he wanted to base his team solely around our attacking trio. Now it's different. I think now we're more balanced, now we're more structured. Yes, we probably rely on Lionel Messi a bit more, but while we've got him, I think we should rely on him. You know, he's a wonderful, wonderful player. You'll never see anything like it again. So while he's here, why not rely on him? Why not put everything through him? And why not? Because so far, it's certainly given us the rewards. But like I say, the most important thing here to note, the differences between the two, is the fullbacks. And that's what Semedo has given us, and that's what the resurgence of Jordi Alba has given us. Both of the fullbacks in the perfect positions, both offensively and defensively, stretching the pitch, giving us that width, and most importantly, everything then going through them down the wing. What we've got ahead of them then is Luis Suarez. Dembele is very key as well, giving us that width on the right hand side. So against Juventus, one of his runs taking the man away for Lionel Messi to run through and score his goal. That's the sort of service that he needs to be providing, not only in terms of assists, but also his runs. So important. The same goes for Luis Suarez. Right now he's not been as effective as he can be, but I think alongside Messi, just over to the left, he can do that. And he's got the mentality to do it. He'll fight for the team. He'll play anywhere you need him to play. But the most important thing here, look at that midfield. And the midfield against Juventus, particularly Iniesta, particularly Busquets, were absolutely outstanding. Busquets ran the midfield, ran the show. Iniesta was brilliant. His dribbling, you know, his close control, bringing the ball out of midfield, the link between midfield and attack. That's what Iniesta gave us against Juve. Rakitic did his job in there, got himself a goal, but it's the combinations between all three. They were all passing to each other. We dominated the ball against Juve, and the most important thing is that control in midfield allowed Lionel Messi to continue taking up that false nine position. He didn't have to drop in too many times, not unless he absolutely wanted to, not unless he got a bit bored and decided he wanted to join in midfield. For the majority of the game, he was in the danger zone. He was in that final third, and he caused absolute havoc. And that is what I want to say right now. This team are balanced. They're good going forward. We're getting the very best out of Lionel Messi. And if that's the case, I'm all for it. We've got midfield control. We're playing out of midfield. We're having a lot of possession. We're dominating games. And in doing so, we're protecting ourselves defensively. We're not leaving ourselves as open on counter-attacks. We're We're not conceding as many chances. Yes, Juve had chances in the first half of the Champions League, but at the end of the day, they're a very good team. Against Espanyol, against Betis, against Alaves, we limited them to very few chances on goal. Right now, we haven't conceded a goal. We're top of the league, 100% win record. We smashed Juve in the Champions League. Everything right now is going very, very well, and it's because Valverde has found a system, has found a group of players here who are playing for each other, who are understanding the way of playing, probably because they've done it before. This is the way they're used to, this is the way they like to play, and they're enjoying it. That's the most important thing. When Messi is enjoying his football, when Iniesta is enjoying his football, you see that he didn't even want to come off. You know, he didn't want rest. Iniesta right now, even though he's getting on, 33 years old, he wants to be playing in this team. He's enjoying it in that midfield role, as opposed to having to run around a lot more like he did last season and the season before. Things are a lot more controlled. We're dictating the pace, we're dictating the tempo, and I really, really like what I've seen from Ernesto Valverde so far, and long may it continue. So leave your thoughts down below, guys. What are your thoughts on what Valverde has brought to the team so far? Like I say, it is very early days, but the signs are good, the signs are promising, and there's absolutely nothing wrong, in my opinion, with being a bit positive. Things are going well, so let's celebrate it while we can. Leave your thoughts down below, guys. I'm always interested to hear your opinions. I'll be back very soon with more videos, but until then, as always, Vesca el Barça!